Hello, Andy. I did see a talk you did. I think it was with a radio station actually. And I read the article you wrote in the counseling directory, and I am very interested in the way you work with all the different modalities. And I just wondered, just for the purpose of people out there, just sort of trying to understand how psychodynamic psychotherapy generally, how it influences, the things you do, from EMDR to taking people running, which I really do think is super exciting and wonderful. I'm kind of like a runner, used to be a runner myself, so I'm quite intrigued with that. So I wondered if we could start with what led you to explore alternative to traditional psychodynamic approaches in trauma work. And I know that's quite a big area, trauma work.
Thanks. Well, I suppose right from the very beginning, even when I was doing my psychodynamic training initially, I was working in organisations that work with traumatized refugees, survivors of torture, etc. People who'd gone through very, really extreme levels of trauma, and were living with extreme levels of poverty and deprivation as well in this country. And so that I found even when I was training that I was pushing at the boundaries of the model, if you like. And I think that we found that what we were doing psychodynamically needed to be adapted. And through that process, I mean, this was over 20 years of work. So to shorten it, I think the last few years I was at Freedom from Torture, through reflective practice, thinking about our work, thinking about what was working and what wasn't working. That at the time we were using a lot of psychodynamic approaches, and we realised that we needed to find a way of working more directly with the trauma in terms of processing it and relieving it. So we were very good at building relationships, very good at helping people understand the kind of their whole story from living in one place, becoming persecuted, moving, etc. But what we weren't very good at, or could have done better, was processing the trauma. And this led us through a process of learning and reflecting and reading and thinking, led us to EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which works on much more with trauma stored in the body, and in the nervous system, etc. We found that's a very effective way of working with trauma. But at the same time, I'd begun a journey which I wasn't even realizing I was on. I was on a particular train towards becoming a PT and a Pilates teacher, because while I was working with the Freedom FFT in Finsbury Park, it's very stressful work, very demanding work, working with very high levels of trauma. And I had started to go to an outdoor boot camp, a physical fitness class in the evenings, first of all to get fit physically, but then I began to notice that by the time I'd gone to this session in Finsbury Park, I'd run around for an hour, done lots of burpees and sprints and press-ups and squats and all kinds of things. I'd then cycle home, I'd have a shower, I'd get changed, and I would be so relaxed, so blissed out.
The benefit for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I began to realize that actually I was doing it more to manage my stress levels and mental health than physical health. And then fast forward a few years after that, I'd was just the early days of setting up private practice. And I remember going to one of these classes in Greenwich Park, funnily enough, not far from where I live, on a beautiful, crisp, clear, cold autumn morning. And at the end of the class being completely, full of the joys of spring, ironically, because it was autumn, and in a really sort of blissed out state again. And I was starting to think about some of my clients I was working with in private practice at the time, thinking about how they might be able to benefit from exercise. Wouldn't it be great if there were classes, for people who were depressed or traumatized? And then thought, well, hang on, why don't sudden flash of inspiration? Why don't I train as a PT myself, as a personal trainer, and start delivering such sessions myself? And I went home, found out how you do that, began the course, began the training. And when you train as a personal trainer or a fitness instructor or a Pilates teacher, you have to learn a huge amount about anatomy and physiology, how the physical, actual biological body works. And doing that completely changed the way that I think about trauma. I suddenly realized that trauma is actually a physical experience. Like if you're in danger somewhere, you're being attacked, and your brain sends you into fight or flight mode. It's an instruction from the brain to the body to literally fight the danger or literally run away from it. So stress hormones go into the body, signals are sent down through the motor neuron system, to get the heart beating faster, get more oxygen into the system, get it pumped round to the working muscles. The working muscles contract. You get ready for the physical activity of fighting or running, and using the same systems that we would use when warming up for a workout in the gym or a workout in the park, etc. Then I began to realize that we can't. This isn't sitting
We
and
can't
thinking
just
and
talk
talking.
to people.
Yeah,
We
it's
can't
not
just
enough.
talk to people. It's not enough just to talk to people to try and
Exactly.
heal
Yeah,
them in that way. But
yeah,
psychoanalysis talks about psychoeducational work.
yes, yeah.
So maybe we could offer them, I don't know, try and find out what it is they do or what they enjoy doing in terms of sort of relieving some of the stress. But you've taken it one step further. And I think what you're saying is through the work you do, you're also learning from your patients, I guess, in a way.
Absolutely. I mean, and some of the way, like for instance, the work I do with boxing,
You do
that
quite a lot of different sort of physical type exercises, don't you, Andy?
the boxing work. I'm not a full boxing coach, but I've
No.
qualified as a boxercise coach.
I do
Um,
know
uh,
about exercise actually. It's quite strenuous.
it is very strenuous, which means I'm able to help do pad work with people. I can hold pads and I can teach
Right.
people how to punch properly. And that all came from EMDR, from the patients, because I remember working with some. It's happened a few times, long before I was actually doing the PT training. Um, Working with a client maybe who've been assaulted, for instance, you might notice as you're processing, as you're asking the client to focus on the memory and follow my fingers with their eyes, you'd see people starting to, you know, a bit agitated physically, wanting to kind of move. And sometimes I might say to someone, "What do you want to do? What's your body?" And I said, "Oh, I want to punch. I want to fight. I want to fight the attacker." And I might say, "Okay, well, throw some punches, and now follow my fingers with your eyes." And we would use it as a way of processing. And I became curious about this, and a few years later, once I'd become a PT, I had a client who was. I have clients sometimes who might be in therapy with me, and they're also doing personal training with me alongside that. And it was during the lockdown, and again, we'd done a bit of work. I've written about this client in a paper. Um, we had done a very intense bit of EMDR work, processing
So sorry, just to jump. So the client is aware, and of course
yeah, yeah,
they've approved that.
yeah.
So,
So I've written
just
about this, yeah.
yeah, for people, yeah.
And the client told me that after at the end of the session, she still felt quite agitated. So there was in her spare room, there was a mattress leaning against the wall. She'd gone in there and had spent minutes punching the mattress, and told me that after that, she felt that she'd released the emotion, which was a memory of an assault, I think, originally. So I said to her, "Okay, well, when the lockdown finishes, I'll go away and learn how to, and we'll start doing some boxing in the actual fitness sessions." And it really began from there. And now I started to do that, offer that as a way of, because and the thinking about it is that this is based on the work of Robert Scar, who wrote The Body Bears the Burden, and also sensory motor psychotherapy, the work of Pat Ogden and Gina Fisher. They talk about this. The way to switch off the fight instruction, the fight part, the fight flight, is to get some people to throw some
To
punches.
physically get something out of the body,
Yeah, but also
the energy, if
because
you like.
the energy, and also because the brain works on feedback. So if the
Right.
brain's telling you to punch and fight, it will keep telling you to do that until it gets confirmation that you've actually the movement has been completed.
But does it work with everybody in
Well,
that sense? Does the brain tell everyone to do this? Because I'm just wondering, other alternatives like yoga, for instance. So I guess maybe with this particular client, that's their way of relieving something within the body. I'm just wondering, how do you choose, which takes us to the next question,
Mm.
how do you choose what is suitable? Or is this something the client is actually bringing?
Overall, I use the framework of the window of tolerance. If you think about, if you're familiar with this, the idea is that the window of tolerance is uh, the normal range of healthy human reactions to the adversities of life. It's a good way of thinking about where somebody is in their sort of trauma cycle. And above the window of tolerance, you've got the window of hyper arousal. So people who are agitated, um, angry, impulsive, etc. People who have been traumatized, and that's a very positive in terms of very positive symptoms that you can see and observe. Underneath it is the window of hypoarousal, so people are not aroused enough. People that are sent into kind of freeze, for instance, or people who are very flat, very depressed, etc. And the idea is that, so if somebody's clear, I think yoga and Pilates, for instance, everything that yoga can do for trauma, Pilates can do as well. I think if somebody's very agitated, and is very angry and very frightened and very anxious, and they need to be calmed down to bring somebody back into the window so that you can do the therapy, you can do the work. Then parasympathetic nervous system based activities such as yoga, breathing, mindfulness, Pilates, things that calm people down. That's what we're doing. We're bringing somebody back down.
Right.
But if you're trying to bring somebody up into it so that you can do the work, if somebody is in, if somebody's hyper aroused, then at the time of the original uh, incident, we probably understand they were probably sent into fight or flight. If somebody goes into freeze, which is the next bit of the cycle, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, submit, they're not, then their presentation will be very flat, very depressed, very down, very isolated. And you've got to sort of re-energize the person so that you can get them back into the window so we can do the work. But the thing about freeze, though, that people don't, and Robert Scar writes about this, is that we think it's just an immobilization, that everything just stops. People think, a lot of people think that fight, flight, freeze is a range of options. The brain chooses either fight or flight or freeze.
Mm.
But Robert Scar writes about it as a sequence. The
Yes.
brain, first of all, is the brain will try fight. Yeah? Let's fight the danger. Can't fight the danger; it's too big. So let's run away from it. Flight. Can't run away. The predator's too fast.
Yes.
So now we'll freeze, right? But the
Mm.
thing is that the fight and flight instructions have already been sent, and they continue. So like the adrenaline, the hormones that neurotransmitters, etc., the stress hormones, the adrenaline, cortisol, the signals, the instructions to fight or flight are still going into the body, but the body is immobilized, and that's which is why people don't often miss the fact that somebody's in that position. It can be very distressing and disturbing, etc. And this is where Robert Scar says that in order to be able to release somebody from that, you have to get them to move, to fight or to run. Now,
Right.
the colleagues in the sensory motor world might hold a cushion in front of a patient and ask them to punch into it, or get them to march on the spot. I
And
thought,
that's
well,
where
to
this
release it,
the boxing comes in.
to get the feed so that to give the brain the feedback that the activity has been completed.
Right.
So like it really depends where somebody is. If they're hyper aroused,
Yes.
might use Pilates to help bring them back down. If they're flat and not aroused enough, I'd use something more energetic to energize them, get them up into the window so that we can then do the work.
It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I think it's brilliant, being able to offer people, what they may not think or know they want, but actually from what you've actually described, learning about the body, the PT training that you've gone through, the EMDR is all been sort of prerequisite, if you like, in terms of sort of them being able to deliver this, and particularly with trauma patients who really are, it's kind of in the body and kind of making sense of the trauma. It's such a difficult experience. So I wanted to ask you, just with regards to the work we do, um, how do you you've just told me how you decide on what modality to use with the clients, which is what we've just talked about. In a way, we kind of try and understand what we, I guess, in a way, with the psychoeducational work, with psychodynamic work, the client is thinking about what they would do or what they could do. In this way, you're kind of offering something to the client and, trying to meet them where they're at. So I'm just wondering how that works in terms of of course, you're still a psychotherapist, but you go running with your client. How do you kind of manage the boundary between being the therapist and being, I wouldn't say a friend, but you're kind of delving into something else here, aren't you?
It's a really good question. Something I have to, think about a lot. And I am, because I do some work during the week, which is just fitness work. It's got nothing to do with mental health or well-being. I just run a couple of outdoor boot camps in Wanstead in East London. I have a couple of PT clients that have got nothing to do with the
It's what
psychotherapy
you
work.
do as your kind of
Yeah,
your
just
hobby, if you like.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and and I'm different. If I'm working with a psychotherapy client in a PT session, I'm different to how I would be
Oh,
with
tell
any
me
other
about
client.
that. How are you different?
Um, Less chatty, I suppose. I talk about myself, or I don't talk about myself at all with a psychotherapy client, even if we're out in the park.
It's
Um,
quite difficult, isn't it? Because you're trying to kind of develop a relationship with them. Because we've
yeah,
come out of the consulting room. I know, with our frame, it's the place, isn't it?
yeah,
The
yeah,
sameness, the fee. Now, when we take it sort of slightly out, which I really do think we need to,
mm,
because
mm,
not everyone can come and sit in a chair in a
mm,
consulting room. So I'm really with you with all this alternative and
mm,
different
mm,
ways of
mm,
working with because people are so different. And this is why we're doing what we're doing in a way to be able to say, well, this is on offer,
mm.
the psychotherapy or any of the other modalities doesn't necessarily, it's not one size fits all.
Yeah. I mean, you can still hold the frame. I mean, as I said, I wouldn't talk about myself in the way that
Right.
I might like working with a class of just general fitness people. I'll be little jokes and anecdotes, and you're telling stories things come out. You might have a chat at the end. It's a very different. But having said that, um, another reason the two things work together is because the relationship between a personal trainer and a client is relational. It's a very relational activity.
Yeah.
Being a PT, you've got to build trust with the client. You've got to the client needs to feel confident that you know what you're talking about. You need to build a rapport with them. And you're asking the client to do quite difficult things, and you've got to be
So
able to
it's also
encourage
a
them. You've got to be able to
professional
motivate them.
relationship,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Sorry to
So
interject.
so there are boundaries
Hmm.
that different. But in the psychotherapy world, like also we tend, I think, I mean, some people that do this, that we might do a bit of running, a bit of exercise, stop and have a chat for a bit. For me, I tend to, when we're doing fitness, we're doing fitness. And it might be that things come up during the fitness session, which we might then think about in the therapy session.
Right.
And so that again, the actual material, the conscious or the discussion of the material is held in the therapy room. So we
Right.
keep it contained there.
Right. That's a
Because I
really good
think
idea.
partly, obviously, for confidentiality purposes, we might be out in the park, give anybody walking past,
Mm.
but also to make it I think the movement, the physical movement we're doing, that is the therapy in the sense of because we don't need to be doing the talking there because it's the body, the nervous system, the muscles is processing material and experience for us when we're doing that.
Mm. It's
Um,
also a form of therapy, isn't it, in a way,
yeah,
in itself?
exactly, and so, um, but I mean, there are occasions where, like, but what I do, I might ask how somebody is, how are you feeling today? Depending upon what somebody might say about how they mood, whether they're feeling flat or they've got a lot of energy or they're exhausted, they haven't, I'll adapt what we do, the physical movement we do. Like, do we need to re-edit? Is this about helping to energize someone? Is it about helping somebody feel a bit calmer? And also I might, if somebody's gone done a bit of a run, or they've come back, or they've done some press ups or something, I might even check in my head, how are you feeling now? How was that? I'll track the emotional experience of the physical movement.
Right. Do you do it straight after the physical exercise, the therapy?
It depends, really varies, because it depends when people are available and I'm available. But I mean, I have had various times. For instance, it's possible, might be that we might do a fitness session in the morning and a therapy session in the afternoon. Right. You see somebody twice in one day, slightly different settings. It might be that they're on different days. It really, it's a question of trying to fit it in. I mean, the biggest thing I'm doing, the main thing I'm doing at the moment, or as part of all this, is the Pilates and EMDR program I run for people with chronic lower back pain. It's obviously chronic pain is an expression often of some kind of emotional disturbance. Trauma is often held in the body as pain, particularly back pain.
Because you link that in your article, the back pain, to trauma, particularly.
And so I've got people who will be having a weekly EMDR session with me around the psychological aspects of the pain, the trauma-related psychological aspects, and they'll be attending my weekly Pilates class that I teach on a Monday evening. And so those people will just go through that every week. And in fact, NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, their guideline for treatment of non-specific chronic lower back pain is now exercise plus psychotherapy.
Yes.
I think they mean two different people. I'm able to deliver both, so I deliver both.
Well, we're trying to bring it all together, aren't we? And I kind of think it's the sort of mind and body disconnect, which really is not separate thing. We're not kind of trying to treat the head compared to the body. And
it's all one system.
It's all one system, absolutely. And it's really fascinating. I just note when you're talking about, the boxercise to boxing to running to EMDR to Pilates. I'm thinking, you are so busy, Andy. Or do you not feel you're busy? And then you talk about your own personal training outside of that. I'm thinking, where do you get the time to do all of it?
I am busy. Yeah, I like to keep myself fit as well. No, I am busy, but I enjoy it, to be honest with you. And I think doing the physical stuff, I find it energizing. I think, as you'll know yourself, if you're a psychotherapist, you sit very still for most of the day, particularly psychoanalytic, psychodynamic psychotherapists. We sit still, don't we? And we just absorb what's coming. So I find it's actually, the two things work really well together, so that there are certain times of the day, certain times of the week where I'm on my feet and I'm moving around. I find that, it's a relief, it's a release. I'm trying, I think now in terms of organizing the week, I'm mostly focusing on the chronic lower back pain work. So I've got people in a group and then seeing them individual sessions. Right. But also,
I was thinking about the group experience actually, and how useful that could be.
Yeah, I think I know from the training at the fitness work I do myself, a large part of it is that it's a group of people we've been training with for years now in Victoria Park, and the people I work with in Wanstead, and the social element to it is massive. It's the fact that it's incredibly supportive group of people, and
you have that in common, don't you? It's like being as a part of the running group.
Yeah,
for instance,
exactly. And people rely on each other, and people talk to each other, and people share. So it's quite noticeable. Often, it'll be an evening session. People turn up. Everyone's a little bit, frazzled from work, but after an hour of the sort of really hard work, you see people just visibly relax, and people start to talk to each other and share, stuff of what's happened during the day, and it's a great form of support. When people are going through all sorts of things themselves in their lives.
Can I jump in here and ask you, Andy? So some people will be listening to this and going, I go for runs and I'm sort of pretty fit. how does this work? I mean, what is the link between the therapeutic side? If we're not thinking of trauma, even though I think everyone carries some element of trauma, why would what makes people want to come to you?
I think I mean, it, how it works is two questions. I think how it works is on a very simple level. We know that physical movement leads to the release of endorphins and serotonin and dopamine, etc., which are the happy hormones. They're the drugs, the chemicals that the body uses to regulate our mood. Our mood. We know that particularly any sort of cardio-based exercise is going to do that in quite a big way. But even weightlifting, etc., will too. I think in general, in terms of lifting people's mood, so somebody's depressed, etc., we know also that the release of those hormones can reduce anxiety, and so on a very sort of simple level, they're very much part of how I would recommend somebody to manage their anxiety or their depression. And then with trauma, I think that, as I said, explained about the way that you can bring people out of fight or flight or freeze by using different methodologies.
I do, sorry to interject. I do get all that, but somebody might be doing all this exercise and stuff, and I guess what they might be doing is using this as a defense against exploring sort of other issues
Yeah,
within their
exactly.
life.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what I mean.
yeah,
That,
yeah, exactly.
because they may be feeling, well, I'm pretty okay, because I'm doing all this exercises, but the exercises might actually be a defense against something else that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is why the two things together is we
Hmm.
can and I think, I mean, I do quite a bit of work with people who over exercise, for instance,
Right.
who
That's
spend too
that's
much
the,
time
the,
in the
the
gym.
ones
Yeah,
I'm talking
yeah,
about.
yeah. And so and it can be a symptom of an eating disorder,
Hmm.
as you know, and it could be very much a way of avoiding thinking about something or talking about something. So
Hmm.
then it's a question of um, coming into the therapy room and sitting and thinking and trying to understand that and trying to get to the bottom of, well, what are you running away from? What are you avoiding? What traumatic experience, for instance, is driving this?
Hmm.
And as you would with any other kind of symptom,
Hmm.
um,
I guess what
there's
you're saying,
also
Andy, if I, sorry to interject again, those two things can sit side by side. We don't need to, it's not a flight into health. I with the over exercising. You don't need to, it doesn't have to be a compromise against the emotional side of things. It's actually better if we're able to sit with both things.
yeah, exactly, and to understand it, because we didn't want people to stop exercising completely,
No,
but we might want them to reduce it,
yes.
or um, so you might think, well, why is somebody going to the gym so much, spending so many hours a day? What is it? And it could be related. I mean, there's all sorts of body dysmorphias of all sorts of different kinds of body image issues come into this as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
And there's this quite identified phenomenon now of muscle dysmorphia, particularly amongst
Yes.
young men who are objectively huge by anybody else's standards, and so because they spend all the time in the gym. But when the young man looks in the mirror, he sees a skinny little boy. So okay, so well, who's
So
that
those
skinny
are
little boy?
those are basically the symptoms, aren't you, that you're
Yeah,
describing? The
yeah,
body dysmorphia, the anorexia, the excessive thinking, that the exercising doesn't quite reach, where one is trying to totally forget about whatever else is going on.
I mean, because if underneath it there's an issue with self-esteem, like
Hmm.
some or some kind of developmental trauma or somebody, then if you need to be managing the symptom without getting to the cause of the problem is never going to completely resolve it. You've got to get, at some point you've got to get down into where does this come from?
Hmm.
To find that isolated, lonely, scared, anxious little child inside the
Hmm.
client. We all have that anxious child inside us, but who needs some help.
Yeah.
Whether we're going to do that psychodynamically or through EMDR, whatever tool we're going to use.
Yes.
And I think it's a question, because I think there will be lots of people who go to the gym every day but never go to see a
Yeah.
psychotherapist, and vice. And I think it, um, and I'm quite aware of being very careful about how I talk about my work, because I don't want to just encourage people to exercise and not stop and think and talk.
Or neither do you want to say
Yeah.
it's the only way. What we're
Absolutely.
trying
Yeah.
to do is actually offer when what the symptoms could look like and when people may and how the therapy could sit side by side with what they're doing. Because I guess what you're saying is when one becomes once a particular exercise or whatever fitness becomes an overemphasis on one's life, but then the problems are still there, then it might offer, we could look at the symptoms as something that might be worth looking at and considering in terms of sort of why one is over emphasized
Overexercising. Yeah. Yeah.
on one particular area. Let me ask you another question,
Mhm.
Andy.
Yeah.
Um, and what do you see as the ultimate goal for clients engaging in these alternative approaches? And I think you have sort of mentioned it, in terms of sort of a better, sort of some sort of integration. But I'd
Yeah.
let you speak to that.
I think, well, I think it's about helping people understand what's actually happening. As you said, there's a massive educational element to all of this, because in order, one has to explain and help people understand what's going on, but it gives you a way of managing your own trauma or your own distress. And I think that if you take panic attacks, for instance, once you help somebody understand that a panic attack is actually the brain telling you to go into flight mode,
Yeah.
so that the brain's telling you to run. If somebody has a panic attack, we offer the natural instinct is to get them to sit down, put a blanket around you, have a cup of tea, sit down. That's the
Mm.
worst thing you can do. You need to get up on your feet and move.
Yeah.
And this is so. And I had worked with people who are runners, and I think once you help somebody understand that the panic attack is that's your brain telling you to. It's what happens when your brain's telling you to run and you don't, but you still have the adrenaline pumping through your body, and then if
Right.
somebody can get up and move, it can help. But
Yes.
it can be in all sorts of ways. I mean, I think with Pilates, and back pain, one of the great things about that is that it gives you a ladder to climb up. In the sense that that there are things that you can do, very simple exercises that will strengthen your core and help with your flexibility, and you can see yourself getting better. Or it might be that sometimes it can be something something simple as just doing some jumping jacks. If you're feeling a bit panicky, just do some kind of movement. So it's about helping people understand what's actually happening and understand the impact it's having on their body, and then realize that from there are actually things that you can do yourself to manage it, and to reduce it, but also to see that the benefits of stopping and thinking and talking about it as well. The two things need to go hand in hand,
Mm.
and that if an over reliance on one approach, um, you know, will sort of distort really your progress. Because I think, but ultimately, I can't, because trauma, whether it's expressed as tension in the body, pain in the body, increased heart rate, etc., whatever it is, shallow breathing, um, you can manage that by moving the body in various
Yeah.
different ways. And
Yeah.
once somebody understands that, it's very
Yes.
empowering.
Yes, it's the understanding, isn't it? And that's where you come in. Um, so how do you see the future of trauma therapy evolving with this integrative approach? And I ask that question because it feels very much that we're moving, with the changing times, there's a lot more around trauma-informed work, but there is a lot more trauma, as a result of refugees
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
people feel being displaced and you know, um, we're kind of been squeezed, haven't we? There's a lot going on around us. A lot more people are reaching to and for therapy. And I think, it is, rightly so. But it often feels to me that, with the work we do, it's really difficult to just, sit still and just, you know, because I think therapy to some extent, in a way, can sort of it can reignite, if you like, the work. Not reignite is not quite the right word, but something gets kind of repeated, if you like, unless we are willing to think sort of somewhat outside of the box, by being able to offer people more, in terms of sort of being able to meet them where they're at. Because I feel to some extent what we've been sort of handed down, was something that was of a period. And unless, of course, we're willing and, I think, like you're doing, be able to embrace and think about, in terms of yourself, what works for me, and being able to embrace that and offer that and think, what else could work for this client. And I'm sure, with what you've done, you might come up with something else and think, yeah, I can add this to my repertoire. It's the beginning, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So sort of back to the question. So how do you see the future of trauma therapy evolving?
Well, what I'd like to see happen would be that anyone who trains as a trauma therapist has to do both a psychotherapy training and some kind of physical activity training.
Right.
So I'd see the two things merging. It might be that, I mean, just imagine if we had people who were trained both as a psychotherapist and a physiotherapist, or a psychotherapist in osteopathy, or psychotherapy in personal training, or psychotherapy in Pilates, whatever it is. So
Yeah.
something like those two things together. Imagine a training that you could do, and you had somebody that would come out, and was trained to integrate the two approaches, so that we just have therapists, not psychotherapists or physiotherapists. We heal this split. I mean, so the history of it, goes all the way back to Descartes, apparently, this idea of the split between the mind and the body, or the soul and the body. It's starting to come together again. And as a result of that, read the histories of this development of medicine. This is why you've had sort of physical medicine developing under and mind treatments developing, and sports and physiotherapy and the rest of it developing, psychotherapy developing in a different way. And I think now things are coming back together again. But to really take that forward, I think I would like to see everybody have to do an element of both trainings, so that we've got therapists who work with people.
Yes.
Because I know, again, in the psychoanalytic literatures, there's a lot of talk about the body, the idea of the concept of the body, the idea of the body, the image of the body, etc. What it symbolizes, the body as a projection from the mind, etc. But I'm interested in the actual physical, biological, anatomical body, and of which there are always at least two in a psychotherapy room. And I think that the more I've certainly found, at the very least, I think there should be a module on anatomy and physiology in every psychotherapy training, because it really opens your mind in a way that just when you put that together with what we know about the mind, put those two things together, it's absolute eye opener. And at the very least, I'd like to see that.
And having people who've trained within sort of the, in biology and, physiology, like you say, to actually train as psychotherapists. Or we're really trying to get lots of different people with different ideas to be interested in what we do.
Absolutely. And a lot of my work is about bridging gaps between the two professions and get the two professions together so we can talk about these things. And we have huge amounts to learn.
I think so.
Interestingly, when I was and I was 51 when I started doing the PT training, by the way.
Well, you look good. I'm not going to
Um,
ask you how old you are now, but
but
it doesn't
turning up
matter, does
to
it? Really, it's
turning up
how
to
you feel.
yeah, and turning up to the workshops, and people would look at me. There's this old man doing here because everyone else was in their 20s and 30s.
Oh, I see.
Yes. But
Right.
then when I explained who I was and why I was there, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
psychotherapist who wants to start using physical exercise to help people with their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
People in the fitness world that I had met got it immediately and said, yes,
Yeah.
well, that makes perfect sense. I
Yeah.
understand that.
Yes.
And so there's a huge amount of interest on that side. But the other thing I wanted to say was we also need to look at and involve and find out and learn about dance movement psychotherapy more, because they've been doing this for decades, the
Yes.
dance movement therapy. And a lot
Yes.
of those people that do that, they were professional dancers, trained dancers, ballet dancers, and then they became psychotherapists.
Right.
And they use
Yes.
dance and movement, and they understand the body and they understand how it works. And they have been reading quite a bit of their literature over the last few years as I've tried to understand, develop a framework for thinking about what I'm doing.
Mm.
And there was a big split again, as I understand the history. Decades ago, there was a big split between the psychoanalysts and the dance movement therapy people, but they've been going away, and there's all sorts of other groups, the body oriented psychotherapy, etc. It's time to kind of bring all these things these groups back together again, I think, because it's because you see, it, where's the mind? The mind's in your brain. Where's the brain? It's in your body, isn't it? It's all
Yeah, but I do
it's
have
all
to
one
say,
system.
I
Yeah,
mean, I'm with you on all of that, and
yeah.
I'm really very interested in sports and fitness myself. So
Mm,
that's
mm,
where the connection is. But I
mm,
also know that not everyone, it's not one side. There will be other people that would probably more gravitate towards yoga or spirituality.
yeah,
So
yeah,
what
yeah.
I'm trying to do is
Mm,
sort of bring
mm,
different
mm.
things that I think would
Absolutely,
appeal
yeah.
to different
Mm,
people. And, I don't think, there's lots of ways of doing this, I guess, is what we're saying.
mm, mm.
And, what you've actually sort of explained here works in terms of sort of a type of trauma, trapped in the body. But somebody else might think, okay, just go on a Buddhist retreat, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
It all works.
Mm,
There's a
mm,
place for everything, I guess, is what we're saying. And the psychotherapy, psychoanalysis in itself is not in isolation
absolutely, yeah.
of all of this.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there are a lot of therapists, counselors, psychotherapists who are also yoga teachers.
Mm.
That's been around for quite a long time.
Yes,
Um, the psychotherapists becoming PTs as well, and doing exercise, a wider range of exercise. That's a newer
it's a
thing, but
newer
I think
thing. Yes, I have
it
to
is.
say,
Yeah,
you're the only
yeah.
one that I know who is a PT. I mean, I know lots of PTs, but you're the only one that I know who's combined this, But they do say, complain about the fact that the clients come in and, talk about their lives and, they
Well,
can't be,
exactly.
they
Yeah,
can't be
yeah, yeah,
both, is
yeah,
what they say.
exactly. But
Mm.
the other thing I wanted to say, I mean, there are a few of us around,
Hmm.
around the place.
Hmm.
Um, and I also wanted to talk about weightlifting, that trauma informed weightlifting is now a thing as well. There's a
Right.
lot of work being done about that in America, I think, connected with the Boston. There's a
Mm.
group called Trauma Informed Weightlifting.
Mm.
Um, and that's wonderful in terms of just helping people as you get stronger physically, you feel better emotionally, you feel stronger emotionally. And there's some great work being done about that as well.
Mm.
There's a wonderful book by psycho woman called Lisa Kudari, who wrote a book called Lifting Heavy Things,
Mm.
which is about her own talking about her own experience of healing a trauma in herself through lifting
Right.
weights,
Yes.
and then starting to teach that as an option. And I think because this is the trauma informed yoga has been around for a long time. That's where it started, and that is wonderful and fantastic. But I think it's just broader than that now. Boxing
Absolutely.
therapy, running, weightlifting. There's all
And we
kinds
know
of things that you
strength
can do.
is actually really also quite important, particularly with the older one gets
Mm, mm,
strength training. Yeah. Andy, I feel we could talk for ages, but we probably
yeah,
need to be wrapping up now. Thank you so
yeah.
much.
That's all been a
Um,
pleasure.
it's been really informative. Thank you.